everybody. This is Educator's Voice. I am your host, Keith Evans. Today we have a very special guest. And our guest, can you please introduce yourself for us, please?
Hi, my name is ShaDe Watson. I am the assistant school leader at Kipp Indy College Prep Middle School in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Okay, cool. Can you tell me a little bit about your background? Where did you receive your education from?
Yes, so I got my bachelor's degree from DePauw University, and I have 2 master's degrees. So I have a Master of Arts in Teaching from Marian University, and then I have a Master's in Educational Leadership from Butler University.
Agreed up. Okay. All right, so ShaDe, I actually invited you on because I actually had the pleasure of having an amazing work experience with you at the Tindley Collegiate Academy. And I observed some of your work. Sometimes I never actually told you this, but you're a very phenomenal educator in the classroom. The way that you handle your class and your passion that drives you behind your work is definitely phenomenal, and I salute you for that. And so with that being said, we're dealing with something out here in Oakland. I have one of my guests that came up with a question. I was going to read the question for you, see what is your thoughts about it. So basically it says, in Oakland, there are many Black scholars graduating with low reading proficiency and without meeting A through G requirements. These are the required courses for one to complete in high school to be accepted into a 4-year university. Scholars are simply being promoted to the next grade level regardless if they master the standard. When this is addressed, some parents care about it, but then there's some parents that are unaware or even lack interest. So based on your past or current teaching experiences, what were methods used to combat this issue that we're facing in Oakland? And what are some ways that you can implement this with distance learning?
So I think the first thing that comes to mind is definitely educating parents. With our work at Tindley and even the work that I'm doing now at Kipp, I think the main important thing is parents need to be educated before the fact. And so a lot of times we're having these conversations with parents after the child has already gotten to the point to where they didn't pass the class or where they're not proficient. But we need to make sure that we're having these conversations with parents when we get the kids. And then also empowering them to be knowledgeable about everything that we are doing in order to grow proficiency. And so I know a lot of the times we talk about different tests we take, like in Indy, we take iLearn, we have MAP, there's Acuity, there's all of these different tests that people take that we use them for data for our students, but our parents don't understand what they are, they don't know what they are, and they don't know what the scores mean. And so I do know that when I was at Tindley, we were very big on having parent meetings to explain these things and just to have courageous conversations because I've always worked in the inner city, and it's just a fact that all of our kids aren't on grade level. And so we need to have these conversations with our parents and let them know what the consequences are if this continues. And that's not saying that, we're going to grow a kid 4 grade levels in a year. We might. But at least you know the efforts that we're taking in order to make sure that the child grows. You know what their MAP score indicates. You know what grade level that puts them at. And then when we talk about college, I'm a big proponent on going to college. I understand trades, and I think students should have trades too, but I'm just for the population that I teach and that I'm the administrator over at this point, it's imperative to have a life of choice. And so a lot of our parents didn't have the opportunity to go to college. And so they don't understand the ins and outs of getting in and what's the SAT and what's an ACT and what do our students have to do in order to pass these tests. And that all builds up on what we're doing with them. In my case, middle school, because most of my career has been in middle school. The second thing that I would definitely say is we have to get our students exposed to reading. And a lot of the times we think that this curriculum has this book, so this is what the student needs to read. And sometimes you have to hook a kid by allowing them to read what they like. And so when I was a special education teacher, I just asked the kids, what do you like? What topics do you like? So some kids like magazines. Okay, we're gonna get this magazine and we're actually gonna read it. Some kids liked, sci-fi and mystery. Okay, I'm gonna find a sci-fi mystery book on your level and we're actually gonna start reading it. Some kids actually like to read the newspaper. And so there's a lot of different avenues that students can grow their reading development and their vocabulary acquisition. But I think sometimes as educators, we're so stuck on the curriculum and like, I have to get through this curriculum and this is the book that I have to read. And like, for some instances, the books are really, really interesting. And for some instances, they're not. But like, how are we going to get these kids to actually feel comfortable reading so that when we're teaching them how to read, they're actually able to put use to the skills and techniques that we're teaching them? And my personal opinion is it has to start with gaining their confidence in reading by allowing them to just read what they like.
Yes, and like you said, reading is important because even looking at the numbers, you'll see that 35% of the scholars graduating are proficient in reading, but then we have like a 75% graduation rate. So it's just like you're telling me these young scholars are graduating without being proficient in reading. But also, with that being said, it's educating the parents on like what is your child's reading level, and also educating them on the grading system, because just because your scholar has an A or B in that class doesn't mean that they master that standard. And that's where the conflict comes in, because I remember a past experience at Tindley. I remember the first week when progress reports came out, a lot of parents was on Miss Merriweather's head because the scholars were, some of the scholars weren't passing her class that first progress report. But in my class, they was passing, so they was like, oh, Mr. Evans, he's a good teacher and all, but really Miss Merriweather was the better teacher. It's just the fact that those scholars really wasn't mastering that standard at the time. Fast forward to when I came out here to California, I was in a situation where parents was jumping on my head because of grading, because when they were in fourth grade, they didn't necessarily get the A, B, and C type of grade. They got like basically like a not yet or a master. So the parents didn't know how that correlates with the grading system. So when they came to my fifth grade class and they end up having a low score, it's just like, oh, my scholar had all these great grades in fourth grade until they got to your class. But it's just like that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a horrible teacher or that your child is missing on. This means like, yo, you need to make sure that we are educating this child to make sure they master the standard, not just giving out watered down grades or whatever. So I definitely implement that Tindley system out here, because I can say that was a school where I actually became an educator, because just under the leadership of the most honorable Kelly Marshall, basically like just having that coach that was guiding me through, not necessarily saying like for the grading part, just making sure that I'm delivering good instruction so that my scholars understand what I am teaching. And so from that experience, how has that experience helped you in your career now that you're at Kipp now?
So I grew up in the Tindley system. I graduated from Tindley. So I was well aware of like how they do education and like their importance on the different structures that they have. I think the main thing that has stuck out to me the most is that like we have to focus on the culture of the school before we can focus on the academics. And so
Can you say that one more time? Can you say that one more time?
I said we have to focus on the culture of a school before we can focus on the academics, because I can coach a teacher into being proficient in teaching an amazing lesson from top to bottom. But if the kids won't stay in the seats, and if I'm constantly redirecting kids, I'm not going to get that lesson out. And so there has to be an even balance between like focusing on the culture of the school and also focusing on the academics. Because if you go in and you're just gung-ho on, this is the curriculum, this is what I have to teach, and that's all you're thinking about, you're missing a key component of making sure that like the culture of your school is strong so that it supports the academics.
And that's my biggest thing. The reason why I actually repeat that, because that's like what we face out here in California, because we have these mayonnaise warriors at the top basically giving our scholars of melanin these excuses. But it's like you have to set the culture first. I guess they feel sorry because I guess whatever environment they come from, that okay, cool, we're just going to water down this for you. We're not going to give you any type of consequence or accountability because of where you come from. But it's like, no, it's like, how can I empathize with where you're coming from, but still equip you with methods and tools to get you where you need to go? Because that's the biggest thing, because you can't teach no scholar anything if the classroom is not intact. And a lot of teachers come in this field thinking that, oh, I'm just about to come in here and just teach these kids and do a wonderful thing, a wonderful service for the world. but at the same time, it's like you got to actually put in the hard work is really the first 2 weeks when you come in encounter with those scholars on how can you have this structured environment so that all scholars in the classroom can learn. And when you have that structured environment where they're learning, that's when we're able to get into the actual instruction to increase these reading scores, and increase these proficiency levels in whatever standard that the teacher is teaching.
And then we have to get out the mindset of like, and this is going to sound a little different, but like sympathy for students. So I can empathize and I can understand what you're going through, but at the same time, like this is the standard. And what I've learned with working with a lot of different types of students, like I said, I was a special education teacher. So I worked with a lot of different personalities, learning styles, proficiency levels. And what I learned is when I set a bar, students might need extra support to reach that bar, but they would reach it. And so you have to get out of the mindset that like, you know, this child comes from a single parent household, or this child has done this or that, so I can't push them to be great, because that's another thing that's getting in their way. There's a lot of teachers who sympathize with them and so then they feel sorry, and then they don't push them and they don't hold them to the same standard that they would hold someone else that that hasn't had that, whatever circumstances that the teacher is judging on it. And it's okay to empathize, because our babies need that. They need us to empathize. They need us to love on them. They need us to support them. But at the same time, they need us to set a bar and to push them to reach that bar, because that's the only way that they're going to get out of whatever situation. They're going to grow academically, whatever it is. That's the only way that it's going to happen, is if we teach them that this is a bar, and that can be behavior, that can be academics, that can be, you know, social emotional, that could be anything. This is the bar. This is what I expect. I'm gonna love you and I'm gonna support you to that bar, but I'm not changing it.
Exactly. And to be honest, that's your specialty area, because you have a background in special education. I remember at Tindley where it was like, if a scholar was on an IEP, like at the end of the day, this is the goal, but these are the things that we're going to implement to help this scholar get to that goal. Out here, it's like, if you're on an IEP, like you just guaranteed to go to the next grade, because they're going to have a plan where they implement. And when we meet with the parents, and then I even hate this, like the parents will get in these meetings and they don't even read over the paperwork. They just start signing without even reading over what the school is supposed to do for your scholar. And then some of these things that are promised to the scholar, it's not even done. Or it's just like they use the IEP as an excuse just to say that, oh, it's okay, they have a disability. It's okay for them not to master this. But from what I witnessed you do, it's just like, at the end of the day, this is the bar, this is where you got to get, and this is my plan to get you there. And so I definitely salute you for that. And with us closing, is there any message that you would like to give out to our viewers right now?
I think there's the one message that I would have is to make sure that you love your students as much as you love yourself. And so I love myself enough to not let myself slack. So you should love your babies enough not to let them slack, to push them to greatness, and then to be there to walk alongside with them. And so it's not always going to be easy, and it's not always going to be a cakewalk in the park, but the end result, like I have had multiple classes of students graduate, and multiple of my special education babies that people counted out graduated with academic honors. And so like that's the stamp at the end of the road for me that shows me that like all of the hard work, all of the late nights, all of the constant back and forth is actually worth it. And so I guess I would just say, like, love your babies as much as you love yourself, and push them to greatness the same way you would do yourself.
Message.
And like we focused on our like the culture of our school, and it's not always negative. It's the positive things for the students, but it's also like the consequence system. And like our year this year was like 1,000 times better than it was my first year, just because we were able to focus on the culture of the school. All the students were on the same page about what the culture and what the system looked like. All the parents were on the same page about what the system looked like, and all the teachers were too. And we made sure to train students and train teachers, so that it's very clear on what behaviors are accepted, what behaviors aren't, and what are the consequences for these behaviors. And that's not saying that we're not doing restorative practices, because we are. Students still have time to reflect. We still have restorative conversations with each other, and sometimes with teachers if needed. But it's also clear on like, this is the consequence for that behavior. So while we will have this restorative, the consequence is still going to come. And like, in my mind, that's how restorative practices should work. Yes, we should work on empowering our students to be able to like reflect on their feelings and have like conversations to rectify or apologize. But at the same time, we can't teach them that that's the only thing that they'll have to do in life.
Mm-hmm. And then just like you said, the important part is make sure that you train your teachers and having that coach who can actually practice what they preach. Because when I first moved out here in Richmond, I was teaching at a school in Richmond. Basically, my coach couldn't even demonstrate what he was trying to get me to do. Like I remember in Tindley, I had a question about my pacing. Miss Marsha she gave me like a poor grade on my pacing. I was like, hold on, fam, like can you please explain this to me? Because she went in my classroom, taught my lesson for me, walked out the door and dropped the mark and walked out. You feel me? And it's like, bro, I was like, oh damn, like she actually demonstrated what she wanted me to do. Bro, I asked him to do the same thing. Bro, I was sitting in the back just like this, laughing the whole time. My class was running this man. And I was just like, how can you be a person? You can't teach what you don't know. So like, how can you guide me? It's like, hey, you're blind to this. So I just really feel like it's very important for us to actually have those strong coaches, especially that look like us and know where these kids come from to actually help these teachers out to deliver effective instruction.
Yeah, we're definitely at Kipp big on coaching. Every week somebody's gonna be in your classroom. If it's not,
Is it effective though?
It's via video, and we're gonna meet once a week. Like we're gonna get feedback on lesson plans. So it's just like all of these different things that are gonna happen weekly. So it's not like a cycle of, I'm gonna give you a formal evaluation every 3 months and then we're just gonna go on with life. No, because that's not how people grow.
Thank y'all for tuning in. This is Educators Voices.